opportunities, but while I'm at the mic at the moment, let's give him a round of applause for being making our day happen. I'm very honored to be amongst you here and to be a third party to this wonderful reunion that you guys have been able to pull off. And so, in keeping with the message in the church today, let's celebrate the day in God's name by blessing the tables. If I could ask everybody to please rise. Blessed be our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. May these tables and all of those gathered around them be blessed in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In peace, let us enjoy these gifts which have been bestowed upon us by the Lord. Blessed is He in all of His gifts. Amen. Joshua Getsu, Kava, Mukian, Puskera, Muris, Morbagraciano, Mesidiane, Ortiaru, Derivate, Monsieur. Amen. Hariafonja, Maribanum, and have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.
Ashley, I love your hair. And I'm not going to hug you even I want to because I can't see my grandpa. So, hi.
There's no escaping the video camera.
donated by Walter and Zane Papazian in honor of their parents, and also Armenian and Saroyan, Zavel's parents. And if you haven't seen it, you really need to look at it very carefully. That stained glass window was designed and constructed by a gentleman by the name of John Lucas. Lucas Stained Glass. Lucas Stained Glass also was responsible for 2 other stained glass windows here at the church. One in memory of my namesake, Charles J. Jarnikian. That was done by John Lucas's father. And that stained glass window was installed at our Elgin Park location before this church was built. So there are 2 original stained glass windows from Elgin Park here, and there are 2 new windows here at St. John's. And you can look at the intricacies of the design, the color of the glass, and so on to recognize the differences. The importance for doing this is multifold. First and foremost, we only live one life. We are all part of one family. But many of us have never met each other before. Now the Turks did an amazing job back in Bitlis, Mush, and all of our ancient homelands many years ago. The amazing job was getting our forefathers to immigrate to America and other parts of the world. We were the fortunate ones. We were the fortunate ones, I'm going to say that again, because those who did not leave aren't with us at all. That's why today in church there I remembered all of those who stayed in Bitlis and who did not survive what took place between 1915 and 1918. It's a very, to me, important time in the lives of all of us here, because that's our history. Why are we here in San Francisco today? Why are we in California today? Because our forefathers had the wisdom to sacrifice everything they had and immigrate to America. And America did open its doors to us and allow us to come in, and therefore allow all of you to be. So that's part of it. The other part of it is we have tried for the last 8 years to put together a family tree of the Saroyan Minasian families. And again, that is part of our heritage. Not today, but for our children and our children's children to be able to look back and say, what are our roots? Who were our ancestors? Where is our family? And we're trying to document that as best we possibly can. We've worked on this for 7 years, and we're still working on it. And we still have many pieces to add, but the significant parts of it are there. The building blocks are there. And we would hope everyone here who has a part to play in that, if you look at the family tree and see that there's a missing part or a misspelled name, provide that information to us so we can update the information. It truly is important. And why is it so important? You are all so blessed to have the name Saroyan attached to your names. All of you. We were blessed by 2 people many, many years ago. Lucy Garabani, and Amina Saroyan. Very special people. And God blessed them with a child by the name of William Saroyan. He lived a very difficult life, as you know. His father passed away at a very young age, and he and his siblings were put into an orphanage. But none of them looked back. None of them pitied their situation. They survived, and not only did they survive, they became very strong members of this country. Not only this country, William became the name for Armenians in the world. When you mention an Armenian, the first thing they think about is William Saroyan. His statues are in Yerevan. His statues should also be in San Francisco. His legacy is so rich throughout the world, but literally is not remembered in the United States. Where he once was the most prolific writer in America, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, he's literally been dropped out of the educational system in the United States. The energy that he brought to the streets of San Francisco, to the streets of Fresno, to the streets of Paris, to the streets of Yerevan, can't be duplicated by anybody. None of us can do what he did, and none of our children will probably be blessed to do what he did. But we all need to remember what he did. We all need to read what he wrote and experience that which he experienced. That which he experienced. He wrote songs at a tender age. Why was he writing songs? We have two of them here, one that was published in 1935, one that was published in 1939. But he also wrote a whole series of songs that were in one of his books, which I was hoping to have ready for today, but it is not completed. But there are 12 songs. They all have a religious undertone. They all look to the future. They all have a strong presence today, just as they did when they were written. So now we look back to his real root, and that's his father, Armenian. Armenian Saroyan was an educated man in the old country who came here as a Presbyterian minister. Presbyterian minister. Now, he just didn't come to America. He wrote about the old country. He wrote about his journey. He was basically the example that William followed. Everything he wrote had his name on it, had a date on it, and it was in longhand Armenian. And his writing, as beautiful as it is also very painful. What he had to give up, his family in Turkey, to come to America, call for his family to bring him here. That is an unbelievable story. A story that is yet to be told by a man who not only wrote about his journey, but composed poetry as well. Poetry. Armenian Saroyan. And how does he end up here in Fresno, California? How does he end up chicken farming in Campbell, California, and then passing away in San Jose? And how does he end up in an unmarked grave in San Jose? We discovered where he's buried. He's buried in Oak Hill Cemetery in San Jose. But it's an unmarked grave. And that, to me, is a project for everyone here to be involved with in the future. Very important. Willie refers to him in his writings. He refers to him in the writings that I've provided you with. Today, with the family picture, 1907. On the back of that little piece is a picture of where Armenian Saroyan is buried. And I would have to say, that's not the way I would want to be remembered if I was William Saroyan's father. And I would have to say that I would like to do something about that, and I have thus far. But that we need a lot more help to bring it on. Now, this has been a very interesting journey for me. I had no idea when my brother called me one day and said, I want to meet you at Berkeley. There's somebody you have to meet. He has Uncle Archie's letters that he's kept from Willie all these years. This bookstore had bought them from my aunt. So we met over in Berkeley, Serendipity Books, and we looked at the letters, and my brother had to leave. He wasn't feeling well. And I stayed with the owner of the shop for several hours and expressed my dream that I wanted to publish the book of letters between my Uncle Archie, who I worship, and my cousin William Saroyan, who I worship as well. Have you ever been to Camp Ferrand Shopping Center? It used to be a racetrack. I used to go to the races with Archie and Willie at Camp Ferrand. The same at Bay Meadows. We had nothing but fun. We laughed, we lived, we did everything crazy. Interesting. So I received the letters. I bought the letters from the bookstore. And along with those letters became a search for the other side of the letters. You have one side of the letter, where's Archie's letters? Archie didn't keep copies of his letters. But I knew Willie had kept copies of everything. Even asked for his own letters back so he could decide what Archie could keep and what he would keep. And keep private and secret. So we put that all together at Stanford, and it took 4 years to put those others together. And we have a copy of that book here. Now, you say you have a copy of that book here. There's a story attached to anything that had to do with either of those two characters. In San Francisco, there was a printer called Grabhorn Press. Grabhorn Press. Grabhorn Press appears on the original copy of Willie's 1935 song. Grabhorn Press also published Uncle Archie's first book of poems called Simple Songs. And I'm going to put a little asterisk by that because David Kirkland said recently at Cousin Jackie's reception for him in San Francisco, at that particular moment, those particular poems written by Archie were the greatest poems ever written in America. This is David Kirkland. And he's a phenomenal writer, as we all know. So here we have the book of letters. Now, that's step one in a project that is vast. Willie once said, if anybody gets into my papers, they have a world to uncover, and I just hope they have the time. Because it's endless. And it is endless. So, thank you all for being here. We're going to start dinner service in a few minutes, but I just want to acknowledge a couple people before we start that. One is Diane Unasi, who's here, who's going to be speaking in just a few minutes about Biblis. Another is my wife, Louise, who's been with me through all of this journey. Things are not my daughters, of course, Michelle and Nicole, my brother Bruce, who's been there at all times, and various other people. One of the silent partners in this journey has been Mark Abukin. Mark's he's not as royal, but he's been he has been a stalwart behind the scenes, listening to me rant and rave. Another person who will be sitting up here in front is Bill Seeker. Stand up, Bill. Bill is going to speak here. He is an authority on William Saroyan in Fresno. And through our efforts and his efforts, he had someone donate to us a vast collection of William Saroyan material that an architect in Fresno had collected for over 50 years. Over 50 years. Books and magazines from all over the world. Charles Nelson was his name. And I think in his absence, we're still going to give him a big round of applause because he so deserves it. And you can take that back to him, Bill, will you please? Let's give Chuck Nelson a big round of applause. Okay, now we're going to, my wife is saying that's enough, everybody's hungry. But before we're going to do that, we're going to have Diane present some slides from Beatley's, and we're going to start the program shortly. After that, I'm going to invite you all to eat, okay? Diane?
There you go.
I wanted to start with just the location of where because people don't know where it's located, but you can see it's located at the crossroads of ancient civilization. Louder? Okay. It's on the crossroads of a lot of ancient civilizations, and for one, it could have been its downfall because it was. Okay. Can't hear you. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? So I was lucky enough to visit Armenia in 2012 with a small group of friends and relatives. Betty was there, Chan, my husband was there, and we visited the homelands of a lot of the people who were on the journey. So the first place we went was Beatley's. Beatley's, you can see, this is during Alexander the Great. It was around 300 BC. It was part of the Persian Empire, and then there's Greater Armenia, historical Armenia, earlier in the 150 BC. Greater Armenia, the Kingdom of Armenia that Tigranus the Great made up the largest extent of Armenia. And Beatley's is right at the tip of Lake Von. And here's our group. We're heading out. First we go to the Genocide Museum in Yerevan, and we had to go through through Georgia to get to Turkey to get to the village of Beatley's. Beatley's used to be a Kurdish emirate from the 13th to the 19th century, and the Armenians and Beatley's formed a large population. The Kurds permitted a large number of monasteries, and Beatley's flourished as a center of manuscript production. The Kurdish rule lasted until 1849, when the Ottomans took over under Turkish Pasha, and we all know what happened after that. So here's some statistics about Beatley's. The province of Beatley's had 681 settlements, 220,000 Armenian population, 671 Armenian churches, 207 Armenian schools. Today there are none. So it's right located by the Lake Von. So we headed over that way. There's Lake Vaughan, there's one church left that they, this is called Et Octomar, the Church of the, the Holy Cross. And so this church was real controversial. The church were trying to destroy all of the Armenian evidence, but this church was saved by a Turkish writer. And the big controversy was putting the cross on, which only happened in 2010. But there were hundreds, thousands of these Armenian churches in Eastern Anatolia, but this is the only one that remains. So here we are on the road to Bitlis. Here's Bitlis. It's located in a little valley along the Bitlis River, a tributary of the Tigris. So it sits in a little valley. It's very cold in the winter and hot and humid in the summer. Very inhospitable. So here's just pictures heading towards Bitlis, and here's the town. You can tell the difference. Here's a caravanserai where it used to be on the Silk Road Trail. So it used to be a trading center. And you can tell the Armenian structures are the ones that are falling apart. They don't keep them up. They're just the stone buildings. Just a few. And in Bitlis, you always see the men just sitting on the street, and the women are doing all the work. That's what we saw. They're playing tabli on the street. They're just sitting around. So here's a Turkish school. You can tell the Turkish buildings from the Armenian ones because the Armenian ones are falling apart. This is a madrasa that's there, and it's mostly Kurds there. I don't really remember seeing any Turks, but you can see the buildings. It's kind of hilly, it's in the canyons. So, just some scenes of Bitlis. And there's an important castle there called the Bitlis Castle that Alexander the Great commissioned in 312 BC by one of his generals who was, his name was like Bedlis, and they think that's how the name of the town became Bitlis. It's a very famous castle. Just scenes of the street. And then here, we're in an old warehouse where the last church, this was the last Armenian church in Bitlis, and it's only built in 1883. So we went into the church, and here we are, the three Saroyans going in. But look what they did to the inside. The church just like never kept up anything, and it's not that old. And then still scenes around town. And this is what we believe to be the Saroyan complex. A couple of the people that my cousin Jimmy has been corresponding with said this was the house. Here's the spring at the bottom. Here's some just scenes around town. I mean, around the compound. There's Willie in front of the house. It's 1964. And the people that Jimmy kept in touch with think this is the Gargonian house. And it's above a cemetery. Uncle owns it in his book, The Cemetery. I don't know where that is, but could have been that cemetery. And then down the hill, there was this building that used to be an old jail. Now it's a museum, and the man who was in the museum gave us that picture that's over there of this castle. These are the two guys that helped us find the place. And then we went to Moosh for dinner. Thank you.
That's a good note to leave it. Let's all start with dinner service. The lines are going to be open on both sides, correct, Louise? 1939, by coincidence. That's 80 years ago. And the title is My Cousin Dikra, the Orator, by William Saroyan. 20 years ago, in the San Joaquin Valley, the Armenians used to regard oratory as the greatest, the noblest, the most important. One might say the only art. About 92% of the vineyardists around Fresno, by actual count, believed that any man who could make a speech was a cultured man. This was so. I imagine after all these years, because the vineyardists themselves were so ineffective at speech making, so self-conscious about it, so embarrassed, and so profoundly impressed by public speakers who could get up on a platform, adjust spectacles on their noses, look at their pocket watches, cough politely, and ringing quietly, lift their voices to a roar that shook the farmers to the roots and made them know the speaker was educated. What language, what energy, what wisdom, what magnificent roaring the farmers said to themselves. Well, I'm going to stop there because if you grew up with Uncle Arm, you knew exactly who Willie was talking about. He was the orator of orators in the Armenian community, where some Armenians profess to be fundraisers, knowledgeable, educators. Well, you put them next to Uncle Arm, there was nobody like him, because he was a pile driver when it came to educating people on the plight of the Armenians and what needed to be done to save the Armenian race. He was with Alex Manoukian and raising money for the AGBU. He was everywhere. Matter of fact, he was right here in this church. He was here at various banquets with Armenians from all over the world. Well, along the way, on this project, all of a sudden, out of the blue, I got a message from, believe it or not, my great-uncle Aron's grandson. And I'd like to introduce him to you now. He is in your folder. I even put a picture of him in there. And a little bio information on him. He took it right off from his father, who was an attorney, and his grandfather, who was an attorney, and became an extraordinary attorney himself. And I'd like to, without further ado, introduce you to my cousin, Jeffrey C. McGinnis. Thank you for that setup.
I am Aaron Aram's grandson, and I'm not Aram. I'm Jeff, and first of all, yeah, we represent the Irish-Armenian wing, so thank you for joining us. And we were just talking at lunch, and, why did I end up with a name like McGinnis? And I think that was, it may be a generational thing, in that my mother, who grew up in Fresno, in the 20s and 30s, where discrimination against Armenians was severe. And I think she wanted out, and she wanted to live her life in another place, in another situation. And at the end of World War II, married my father, very handsome military officer from Iowa. I mean, these two were about as different as night and day. And then we lived in Berkeley for 7 wonderful years, and then my father got a position in the Eisenhower administration, moved back to D.C., and our family's been there ever since. We always talked about coming back, which couldn't make it. My father, or my grandfather was a bombastic speaker. I mean, he would just blow the windows out in his room if he wanted. And he didn't enter, he exploded in the room. And any of you who knew what it was like. And I know as a young kid, when he would come, my mother says I was terrified I would go hide with the neighbors. I'd never come home until I was hide. And you go to the supermarket with the whole thing. I mean, they exploded into the supermarket. And it was just, I mean, it was a night of the whole. But I want to pick up on what Diane talked about going to Leaders. And in the same year, you went in the spring, I think, it was September of 2012, and my law partner had come in a few months earlier and said, you know, I've always wanted to do a National Geographic trip to Turkey. Would you guys, you know, my wife and I, would y'all want to come? I said, absolutely. But while there, it'd be kind of fun, you know. I'd like to also go see where my grandparents, particularly my grandfather, came from Greece. And, okay, sure. And, you know, to me, you know, you hear about and you read about everything that's going on with the Armenians, but you don't really have a sense of it. I think it's all kind of abstract. With so much distance. So I didn't really, it's like going to Pittsburgh or something. You know, you just don't really think about it. And so we finished tourist Turkey, which is lovely, and you know, went to Istanbul and Cappadocia and Ephesus and Bodrum and all the. You end up at Bodrum, it's like the Monaco of Turkey, living in just this leisurely life. And then trip was over, and we flew back to Istanbul, and everybody went one way, and we got on a plane and went to Kars. Now, Kars is way in far northeast Turkey. And we got off at 5 o'clock in the day. And I was saying, good God. And you look around, and everybody's in headscarves, and it's just, I mean, it's Kurdish, everybody's Kurdish, it's just, you're in a different world. And we also had the joy of our luggage came along. So there we were. Okay, well, I'll go out and talk to our guide who's driven over from Europe. As Diane said, you have to drive up across the southern border of Georgia and into Kars. And so I said, we have a problem with luggage. You know, would you mind going and speaking? Because we don't speak Turkish. He said, well, you can walk. You're our guide, and we're going to go 10 days. Yeah, but why would I want to speak Turkish? I'm Armenian. So, okay, this is going to be interesting. And so we ended up, we sort of sat down, we told them where we wanted to go. So we did this loop that went all the way around near Ani, then came to Lake Van, Akdamar, and then went into the, and I mean, I don't know how you guys felt when we were there in that part of Turkey, which you cannot go there. They will not let, I don't think they let Americans in. It's very, and I don't think we saw more than 8 Europeans and Americans the whole time that we drove about 1,000 kilometers. I mean, tourists do not go. The facilities are not such, don't go there. So we went around, and at one point I told, as we're driving down the road, I told them, I looked on Google a few days ago and noticed on this very road, maybe 100 miles ahead, the PKK, the Kurdish nationalists, had ambushed a Turkish convoy, killed 12 soldiers, wounded 60. Some big firefight up ahead. And he said, should we be worried? And he says, no. Have Armenian plates on the car. And we're fine because, you know, that the Kurds don't like the Armenians that well, but they really hate the Turks and really so we're all, you know, yeah. Which was true because we would actually go through checkpoints and they would stop every Turkish car. Oh, Armenian plates, and it was not a problem. Now, Diane and Jen were in a bus with 17 people going around Turkey. So they, you know, went in, and you saw they went into Beatles. So you come from Lake Von, you go through this mountain passage, you go way down, it's in a very narrow valley. And they came into Beatles. And I had this certain vision, like all, you read that book, my read Uncle, where he talks about what life was like there as a kid, and I go, God, it's so cool to walk along the same streets, the same buildings, see the same, feel the same thing. And so we get there. They came with 17 people, with like, which for me leads to like an invading army as they came into the town. And there were only 4 of us and our Armenian guys who didn't speak Turkish. And so it was interesting, we had hotels that we would stay at night. And because it was a pre-packaged deal, we would get breakfast and dinner. For lunch, we were on our own in the economy, and since our guy kind of hated to even walk into anything Turkish, that we learned if we were going to survive the day, that we had to leave him in the car, and then we would go into a market and buy bread and other stuff, and to survive till dinner. So we walked around, and the deal was, okay, we'll eat, and then we'll go try to find the contact. And so we're walking, after about an hour and a half, we walked around Leeds. I mean, I just had this, and there's a picture of it, I just had this overwhelming sense of dread. I mean, I just felt unbelievably nervous, and I couldn't, we had been all over Turkey. We've been in Turkey for about 15 days, I think, at that point, and Eastern Turkey, too. It's a beautiful places, you walk downtown, you're $80 a year. I mean, you were really hungry. And, but I turned to our Turkish guy and I said, this place gives me the creeps. And he said, if we don't get out of here in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to lose it. And it was, I think it was walking up and down, and like you show the pictures of the people in the shop that sit there smoking and drinking their tea, and I didn't finish you all 100 years ago. And why are we here? We're trying to, I know the Turkey wants to join the EU, setting up some kind of reparation deal or whatever. You're like, we don't have anything, but I really don't want you taking my home stuff. And it was just this overwhelming sense of, we got to get out of here. And I told, and I don't think anybody else is feeling too cool, so we bailed into the car and kept going down blind alleys, required local knowledge to get around town. Finally got in the main road, driving up the hill. And it was a weird feeling, but I felt free, like I was making my escape. And I bet this is how Grandpa Aaron, how he felt going up the hill. Now, he wasn't driving in a minivan or air conditioning or anything else. He was in an ox cart and plodding his way to Bush, where he went first. And that's what we basically then, for the next few days, followed the route. We went to Bush. I will tell you one other story. Sure. So the next day, we found a place in Bush. We didn't even want to go down. You guys went downtown. We couldn't go downtown Bush. The whole place just freaked us out. So we found a place outside town and stayed there. Then the next morning, we were driving to Airstrom, and this is the October, the turnip harvesting. So you see these huge wagons full of turnips. And I saw all these wagons, and they were stopped, and there were about 20 turnip trucks, a whole bunch of people standing around with a road sign that said, beat these Arizona. I said, this would be cool. This is great fun. We have kind of places. So we got out of the car, and I'm taking pictures. I don't know if you've ever been like this in Eastern Turkey. Everybody's Kurdish. When all 4 of them turned around and started walking at us. And there was not one word exchanged. We all turned around, got in the car, and boom! Away we went. And there was no conversation in the car, because it's sort of a back road. There was no conversation in the car all the way through until we got back on the main road up to Arizona. And I was thinking, so this is, so my grandfather must have come along this road, and he was very worried about Kurds in those days. He was worried about but it was a 5-day journey, and he ended up in Arizona for a couple of years, trying. But I guess it was. So we went through all that. We ended up in Yerevan, in the museum, in the Holocaust Museum. And our guide is showing us all the different examples. And then he gets to, and he's just watching me the whole time, like, when are you going to start crying? And he couldn't get his eyes off me. And I could not cry. I could not do that. All I could think of was, our family, everybody in this room is related in some way here. And, but how lucky we are that my great-grandmother Nat said, we're out here. And how did she do that? This was Turkey in 1905 in a male-dominated society where women were treated like absolute crap. And where the infant mortality rate at that time was 85%. I mean, think of that. This is the kind of world they were living in. Somehow, she got them out of it, and she got, her sisters and everything, and in-laws, and got everything together. Went to Arizona, and then Marseille, and then came to this country. But it was in that museum, all I could think of is, thank God, I was so lucky because they saw the writing on the wall and they got out. And those who didn't make it, we did not make it. But we, so what is the common characteristic in this room? We are survivors, and we have a survivor gene in us, and that enables us to, okay, trouble. And then we figure out how to avoid the trouble and get to a better spot. And I just think, and I think of our God too. Well, he's probably not earning very much money. Well, everybody here in the room does okay. But to be trapped in that kind of environment is unbelievable. So all I can say, folks, is thank you to Diane, thank you to Butch. Coming to get this is an unbelievable setting, setup. Thank you, Father, for what you service today. It really is an incredible day that none of us will ever forget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. We hadn't seen each other in over 60 years. It's quite extraordinary. Now I would like to call on my grandson, Alexander Saroyan, who is going to entertain us on the piano.
I'm going to play Fantasy Impromptu by Saroyan.
No, you don't need. I don't think you won't need it, Alex. You won't need it.
You won't need it.
tell you, as his grandfather, he brings tears to my eyes when I hear him play. What more would you ask from a grandson? Sweetheart. Fantastic.
Very Armenian.
Okay, now, next I would like to call on Micah Genyon, who is going to share some experiences and some stories about Saroyan. He's not on the program in your packets. However, he is a professor at Rosemont College in the Department of English. And he is a scholar on Saroyan, the author. Without further ado, Micah, I'd like you to come up.
Thank you, Charles. Good afternoon, everyone. As an unofficial ambassador of William Saroyan's work, with her own personal connections to Saroyan, and as a Saroyan scholar myself, my sister Megan and I are really both honored and delighted to have been invited to be present at the first Saroyan family reunion. Just yesterday, Charles was telling me about how special and gifted this entire clan is, and wondered about the particular and potential, both direct and maybe mystical influence of one particular person on the Saroyan family tree, Lucine Gaoklanian Saroyan. Could I see a quick show of hands? Who is very well aware of their relationship with Lucine Gaoklanian Saroyan? She is the mother She is the mother of Takubi, Dikran, Paransen, Verakin, and Aram. So maybe we should have seen a few more hands. Immediately when Charles was telling me this story and his speculations about her influence, my mind went immediately to all the affectionate and reverential references to Lucine Gaoklanian Saroyan across William Saroyan's work, and in particular to Saroyan's 1936 short story, The Living and the Dead, which was published in Saroyan's third collection of short stories, 3x3, when he was 28 years old. How many of you are familiar with this particular story, The Living and the Dead, and 3x3? One of his many must-reads. Saroyan writes, my grandmother came in the middle of a story. My grandmother came into the room and stared bitterly at everything, grumbling to herself and lifting a book off the table, opening it and studying the strange print and closing it with an angry and impatient bang, as if nothing in the world could be more ridiculous than a book. My grandmother is a greater lady than any lady I have ever had the honor of meeting, and may even be the greatest lady alive in the past 70 class, for all I know. They're always having baby contests in this crazy country. But I've never heard of a grandmother contest. My grandmother would walk away with every cup or gold or blue ribbon in the world in a grandmother contest. She can't read or write, but what is it? What of it? You could ask her what's 2 times 2, and she'd fly off the handle and tell you not to irritate her with such ridiculous and silly questions. But she's a genius. Later in the story, Saroyan continues, she sat down with a sigh and again stared bitterly around the room. These books, she said, I don't know what you expect to learn from these books. What's in them? What do you expect to learn from them and from reading? Almost 30 years later, Saroyan best answered this question, putting language both on the unrelenting creative force within him, as well as some of the larger artistic objectives which span his life's work. He writes, I believed in writing. I believed it could do everything, anything. But I had in mind that it could bring love, and therefore meaning and balance, order and equity to the human race. I had in mind that writing could improve the very nature of man. I believe this because I believe that all aspects of possibility are in all men, and that the desired aspects may come to dominate the others by means of awareness, as when a man begins to think and choose. And I believe that nothing moves a man swifter to awareness, to thinking and choosing, than the reading of a good piece of writing. I believe that writing was going to play a very important role in the survival and enlargement of the human being. Again, in closing, much appreciation to the efforts of Forever Saroyan. Much appreciation and congratulations to Charles and to Louise for creating this opportunity for this big Saroyan family to come together today to deepen their connections with one another, to your dynamic lineage, and your beyond rich family and Armenian cultural history, and to truly one of the greatest, though still underappreciated and known, writers and artists of all time, who is yours, and William Saroyan might very well say, you too. Thank you.
This relationship started just a short while ago as a result of an effort that was put forth by the Renaissance group from Armenia in Fresno, California, August 31, 2018, during the celebration of Willie's birthday, and also the sort of, I'm going to call it the housewarming, the revitalization of Willie's home on West Griffith Way by a group from Armenia who restored the property to the best of their ability and have created the Saroyan House Museum in Fresno. At that
event. I got to meet both Megan and Ryan Jenyon at the reception at Fresno State College. And after they introduced themselves to me, I realized who they were. They were Alan Jenyon and Rosemary Jenyon's children. Alan and Rosemary were ACYO members with me back 60 plus years ago. ACYO, the Armenian Church Youth Organization here at St. John's, they were in Fresno. So beyond that, I also remember reading that Alan had been involved with Willie at the closing of his life during the time when his will was being revised, amended, and then Alan actually took half of Willie's ashes and carried them himself to Armenia. So there was a special connection. And then Megan sent me a note, sent Louise a note, and then came to visit. And then I started to learn more and more about their depth of knowledge of William and their interest in what we were doing in San Jose with the archive and the collection that we have been able to gather. So we've become inseparable in many ways, and I hope that that relationship will continue in the future as we continue to develop what we hope is a very extraordinary effort on behalf of women. I'd like to call on Avak Saroyan from the Renaissance Group. He flew in all the way from Yerevan, Armenia, to be here with us today. And I asked him to bring me one thing when he came from Armenia. One thing. Now he's brought me many gifts. He's brought me Armenian cognac, beautiful books that they've produced. This time, what did I ask for?
He asked for rocks. For Armenian rocks.
Rocks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have prepared a small speech. At first, I would like to say thanks, Charles, my best friend, who gave me this opportunity to be here. Because this is an honor for me. I would say this is a huge honor for me to know him, to know Charles, and to get acquainted with all of you. Because this project which we have implemented it in Fresno, this was very important and hard for us. I represent Renaissance Foundation, which aims to turn William Saroyan's last house into the museum in Fresno, California. And we have started this project in 2016. I have been working and I have been managing this project already for 3 years. And I would like to tell a short story about one of my experiences which I had yesterday. I was participating in an event in Fresno. It was not relating something like Saroyan. It was relating the General Council of Armenia in Los Angeles. And there were many representatives from different corners of Fresno. And there were 4 guys who gave speech. And all of them mentioned William Saroyan as a person who put the Fresno on the map. All of them mentioned that William Saroyan was a person who was a bridge between Armenians and Americans. And this is one small fact that Saroyan and his family have a huge reputation in this country. And I'm proud to be here. I'm proud to represent William Saroyan's first museum in the world. And that museum in Fresno, you are all welcome to visit the museum. Just for information, the museum is by appointment only. And you need to book your tickets. It is full free. It's free, and you can book your ticket in saroyanhouse.com website. And you can have that experience which we are prepared. I don't want to tell many things about the museum because it's very hard to describe experience which you will get in the museum. But I want to tell a short story about our meeting with Charles when I met first time. It was in 2018 when I came to San Jose. I visited to Charles, and the aim of my visit was to understand would he cooperate with us, would he cooperate with future museum. And I was giving different questions. I don't know, I was asking would he give some sketches, would he give some pictures of Saroyan, would he give some, I don't know, this, that, and some other things. And the answer was very simple. He just said, everything which I have, it's also yours. Do it what you want, and there is only one condition. You need to do what you want in high quality. And I did it. And during that period, it was very hard, because that period, nobody was believing that we can succeed it. And everybody who I met during that period was telling that you couldn't establish the museum in neighborhood. And also the house was in historical preservation, it was historical preservation. And we had just 3 or 4 months for finishing the construction process. And everybody was telling that you couldn't do that. It's very hard to establish something in neighborhood. But he believes us, and we did it. Thanks, Charles. Thank you very much.
Now we go on with the show here. There's someone very special from Fresno who started to work with me when my archivist, Mary Alexander, whose name is referenced here in various places, decided she wanted to move on, and we had to look for another archivist to work with us and moving the project along. And we put out a employment opportunity request, and lo and behold, here came a response from someone from Fresno by the name of William B. Seekers Jr. And he went on and explained a litany of deeds he had been involved with William in Fresno, and he wanted to work with us. Now, he was a very, very well-educated man. He was in a prestigious location in Fresno with a library. He had witnessed many things that had gone on with the Saroyan materials, not all of which he agreed with, but he stood at this level in my eye when he came to visit. And when we came down to the wire on the book, it's over here, the letters between William and Uncle Archie. He stepped in and helped me, and Mary finished that off and did an incredible job. And because of the effort we were putting into our side, Bill was the one who was responsible for the connection to Charles Nelson in Fresno and the collection that he was able to provide for us. In addition, he has resources far beyond anybody else in terms of Saroyan materials that are archived and in locations that many people don't know about. I don't think there was anybody in the world before him or after him that has as much material, ephemera as you would call it, that my niece Jackie would agree, ephemera. I mean, everything from racing stubs from Ken Foran, when he and Uncle Archie would go, to monetary tabs of what he was spending on this and that and everything else. Some people didn't give him credit for his financial acumen. Well, let me tell you, he was brilliant. He kept track of every penny. He kept track of every rock. He kept track of every piece of correspondence. He wrote a diary every day. A diary every day. He wrote journals every day. You'd wonder when he had time to work. But every day, it was a discipline he had to do from the time he got up to the time he went to bed. So I called upon Bill to talk to us a little bit. He's got an upcoming event that he's handling in Fresno. Bill?
Am I audible to everybody? Easily good. I'm never quite sure whenever I'm in front of a microphone whether it's working or not. Anyway, thank you, Charles, for that wonderful introduction, giving me way more credit than I deserve. But and by the way, thank you all for being here today. I've had a wonderful time talking to old friends and making a few new ones as well. It's been absolutely wonderful. Saroyan is such a huge subject. Charles and I both get overwhelmed by it just thinking about it and discussing it sometimes. The best count I've heard is that his works have been translated into a total of 37 different languages at this point. 37 different languages, think of it. I mean, to get to a count like that for any author, we have plenty of noted American authors who've never been translated into 37 different languages. That's remarkable. And while the Saroyan front seems kind of quiet these days, it always amazes me how it keeps coming back and new things began to appear. On March 6th, there was an article probably, I know some of you have seen it, but it was in the Fresno Bee. And this fellow who used to be an editor at the New Republic was talking about how he'd had a manuscript for years because Saroyan wrote occasionally for the magazine. He had a number of pieces that appeared in it, and then one that he sent, he was looking at it, and the fellow who wrote this article was looking at it, and he was like, well, I've never seen this one before, and I wonder if it's unpublished. And the whole tone of the article was to the idea it seemed to be pushing was, well, isn't that remarkable that there be an unpublished Saroyan story out there somewhere? And I felt compelled to respond to this. And if you go online and you look at Fresno Bee's letters to the editor for yesterday, they went ahead and they printed it. And my position was quite simple. There's a lot more to Saroyan. Most people don't even really realize it. If there isn't a large proportion of this work that's unpublished, it might even be a majority of this work that's never seen print. And think about that. A writer who's been published in 37 different languages, and there's still more out there to be discovered. That's the immensity of the task that Charles and I and Mary have been working with for the last several years. And it's daunting and it's surprising. And things keep coming out of left field like this. But I felt it was necessary to educate everybody in the idea that there's a lot more to Saroyan than anybody's ever heard of before. Even people who know Saroyan as a subject very, very well. So that's remarkable in itself. To that end, Forever Saroyan, as you can see from the table back there, has been trying to put forward some of the old and one of the big new things, which was the correspondence, as Charles was talking about. And I'm very proud to have been a part of that. And I think we managed to do justice to that whole treasure trove of letters.
And again, to think that that's just, that's one side, that's one part of Saroyan's correspondence. There are many, many more to it. Stanford, as you know, has the main papers, but there's a lot of it scattered all over. And over at Forever Saroyan, what we're trying to do is pull a lot of these resources and find out about these things that are out there, because Saroyan is such a huge subject, you just can't be contained within one master art. It's a lot bigger than that. And, oh, sure. This coming April, one thing, I'm a board member of the William Saroyan Society in Fresno, and every year we sponsor a walk that goes around to the different Saroyan historic sites. If you go to the William Saroyan Society website, which can be Googled and found with great ease, it'll give you some of the details, but basically we take a walk through the old neighborhood and through a goodly part of Armenian town. It's interesting. If anybody wants to join us down there, get a hold of the details. But basically, all you have to do is follow the instructions and show up, and it's free to everybody. And
How do they find out?
The William Saroyan Society website will fill you in about the details. But anyway, we go through downtown, we go past the Postal Telegraph Office, which was the inspiration for the human comedy. We go through Courthouse Park, where there are a couple of Saroyan memorials, and actually we started at the William Saroyan Theater. All of downtown Fresno is very, very redolent of the memory of William Saroyan, and this is part of what we explored. This time around, I've added some things to the itinerary. Vara Samuelian's studio, which a lot of people thought had been torn down, but is still very much there. We're going to go past that. That's an important site in the Saroyan story as it relates to Fresno. And then we'll also stop by Valley Bakery, which unfortunately is now closed on Saturdays. So we can't go in to take a look, but that's where Saroyan often paused to get a loaf of pita bread before he went down to Varas's studio. It became something of a ritual. Anyway, there are a couple of things that I'd like to bring up that I think you'll find to be interesting or entertaining. A long time ago, of course, the nature of this business is you hear all kinds of terrific Saroyan stories, some of which have never managed to get into print, and hopefully someone will write them down someday so they're not lost. But one day I was talking to Hank Saroyan down in his home, which was then at Sherman Oaks. And of course, he's always, whenever the subject of Uncle Bill comes up, he's always got any number of great things to talk about. But my favorite story of all is the one where he was, you know, he's been involved in the entertainment business for a long time. And in his travels, one time he found himself in New York. And they were at an old line restaurant. I forget which one it was. But he was over there having a meal with somebody named Jim Henson. Yeah, that Jim Henson. And it was, let's say, a very animated, boisterous discussion. And the volume level got kicked so far on it that one of the waiters felt obligated to come by the table and tell the two of them that you're making too much of a ruckus. We really can't, we know you're enjoying yourself, but we really can't have you go on like this. And actually, there's been, you know, in a place like this, which is a pretty swank restaurant, the waiter was saying, you know, normally we don't have to silence anybody. Nobody gets as far out of hand. But there was one time a long time ago where we had to go by the table and ask somebody to turn down the volume level. Guess who? William Saroyan. The whole business had come around full circle, which when I heard that story, I thought, this is absolutely fascinating. Who would have thought there'd be such a coincidence on that particular night? And when he was dining with Jim Henson, no less. Another thing that I think is awfully interesting, Charles gave a little bit of background on the publications that Forever Saroyan has done and the nature of the business and how the collection has expanded. And now it is a very fine collection with things you definitely won't find elsewhere. But when he was starting his business, he had come across the deluxe publication of The Daring Young Man on the Flying Trapeze that had been produced by the Apostolic Press in Northern California. And he was thinking, this is a beautiful production. I'd like to do something similar. So he hastened to find out the business about, the current business about the Apostolic Press. It was run by a husband-wife team. When Charles called, it turned out that the husband had passed away sometime before, but he explained to her what he was interested in doing and how he was interested in getting a hold of a fine press operation who would do real justice, who could produce Saroyan's work in a very creative, artistic format. And the suggestion was made, well, you might want to contact Andrew Hoyne at the Arion Press in San Francisco, and lo and behold, Andrew Hoyne is the inheritor of the Grabhorn Press, which Charles mentioned a few minutes ago. And during the 1930s, the Grabhorn Press had done not only the Simple Songs book, but a number of shorter pieces that were by Saroyan. So Charles knocked on the door, and Andrew Hoyne, now in his early 80s, was still over there, and he took on the project of the Saroyan correspondence, which I think is fascinating because it was as though this whole business had come around full circle, and history in a way was repeating itself. But again, just like the restaurant story, this whole Saroyan business is something that runs in circles, and the same characters or their descendants and other people who are within the cast of players, they circulate among each other, and they form this unbroken chain. And the thing that I remark on when I see this is this has got to be some kind of divine sign that Saroyan is fated to go on and be recognized and be noted as the great man and the great author he is. There are just too many coincidences going on here to think otherwise, or at least that's the way I put it. So anyway, I don't want to overstay my welcome here. Everybody has been quite gracious, but again, Charles, thank you. It's been a privilege to talk to you, and we'll all go forward and keep the Saroyan name bright and green.
Okay, now we have dessert. So everybody get up and stretch. And now I'm going to come with the microphone table by table so everybody can introduce themselves and the connection, the family. We're going to ask some of the family members who have prepared a few things to say to come up and speak to us. And before I ask you to please rise for dessert, I'd like to ask you all to recognize my niece, who's sitting at the head table, who has been communicating with me through back channels ever since the beginning of this project, and actually before it got started.
Jackie, could you please stand up? And I'm going to give you the microphone before the evening is over here, before we all go home, but I just want to say how much help she has been and how much light she has allowed me to see on the whole family. And there's nothing she doesn't know, and no one she doesn't know who has been involved with the Saroyan legacy ever since she stepped down in the scene. Thank you, Jackie. Let's give Jacqueline a big round of applause. For all of the members of the Saroyan family. And one guy sort of taking charge of the event, which is unfortunate, but almost uncontrollable because that's the kind of guy. However, I want all of the rest of our family to share that which they have brought. And I want to start here with my cousin Jerry, Armenian, and Barbara. And their product, because their children, who have all become faithful members of this church, hard-working members of this church. So it's passing to the next generation, which is what this is all about. Today, tomorrow, and the future of the Saroyans and the church. And I'd like to turn this over first to Jerry, since I've talked to him, and he's been willing to share some stories about his side of the family. And we grew up here together too in the ACYO. So this is like Jerry. Katsu.
Good afternoon to whoever's left. My name is Jerry Saroyan. My father came to this country in 1920 with his family. We had some pictures back on the back table. They immigrated from Belize, Turkey, and they came into New York and then were consequently got name tags as we have leather jackets, and they took a train 6 days across the United States, not speaking 10 words of English. How they did it is still a mystery to me. But their mother came with 4 sons and 1 daughter to the United States. The 5th son, the oldest son, my uncle got bounced in Ellis Island because they deemed him infirm, he or a member of his family. And he was sent back to Gibraltar, and he consequently re-immigrated. The family kept sending money trying to get him back to the United States. And he was unable to enter the States, so he immigrated to Mexico, where he lived for 30 years. And then moved to the United States. He moved to Fresno in 1955, 1956. My father's name, as I said, they had many names. It was Gunnar or Gunnar. My mother, when he came to the United States, no one could pronounce it, so they called him Carl. My mother, when he married my mother, did not like Carl. She says, that's an old country. So she changed his name to King, K-A-Y-E, and that's the way he finished out. There were 3 of us in the family. My older sister, Arlene, is with us. Her husband, Ed Barber, they've been married for 62 years. My brother, Richard, I'm the youngest. My brother, Richard passed away 2 years ago at 8 years old. And I am the youngest. Arlene has 2 children, Noah and her son, Edward Jason, EJ, as we call him. Noah's 2 boys are here, Dan and Joe, and Jim is wandering around some things. Charles wanted me to tell a funny story. So, I remember when I was in high school, my father always taught us to be very proud of the Saroyan name and to be proud that we were related to William. I was in high school in the 60s. So I went to George Washington, and I remember in English class, all of the teachers, when I went to school, were in their 60s. They had already taught my sister, my brother, my cousin Antica. The whole family went to English was my worst subject in school, the very worst. And the other little story I'm going to tell, and then I'll give up the microphone, is I'm not a big fan of William. William got me into a lot of trouble when I was in school. As I said, the teachers were expecting wonderful things from me. English was my worst subject. So I've got 3 books by William at home on the bookshelf that I haven't touched. I am reading Meet Uncle Laura, which is interesting. But my father's father grew up in a household that they showed on the street. And his name was Mom. He was a tailor. That's the end of the story. Cousin Jack is here. My cousin Antica, they're the children of my Uncle Mira. Uncle Sam never had any children. My Uncle Art, the youngest, is Saroyan. His son is here, Stephen. Oh, there it is, over there on the chart. And that is our family. And it's been a pleasure. See him? Oh, I forgot to see him. Uncle Mira's oldest. Yeah, and Steve Earl. And Earl. Where are your folks are in the desert? Your folks are in the desert?
I'll start from the beginning. The Saroyan brothers came to San Francisco when they first came to the United States in 1920. They settled in Fresno, and from Fresno they migrated to San Francisco, and they ended up opening sugar fruit shops. Two of them. My father, Leon, was the Uncle Sam that was married to him and did not have children. My father, Leon, my sister Lucille, my brother Earl, my dad, and myself, and then Uncle Kay, Jerry's father, Libby's father, and it's interesting, I was telling Arlene that Arlene and I grew up with sisters because we lived in the flats in San Francisco. And when we were kids, I used to think my Uncle Kay, that's Arlene, and Jerry's father was the fun uncle because it was always enjoyable. My father was the kind of, what would you say, Jack? More like Jack. Serious like Jack. And we had a lot of fun growing up together, and Arlene and I, and I don't even know who's not here today, my sister Lucille, which passed away. Her nephew is here, this is Alvin. And my sister's oldest son, and my daughter Anne, my son Glenn, and my son-in-law John, my nephew Alexander, and we are very fortunate to be here. And Charles, thank you for doing this. It's a joy to get together and see some people. Wayne. My brother Earl's son, Wayne. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. She forgets about me because we only talked for about an hour on the phone yesterday. I'm not going to go into the family history, but like Jerry, going to school with the name Saroyan, I was told the same thing. You got to do something about that, so I've actually been a working writer since I was about 12 years old. I'm going to share with you a funny story, and we're going to get around the rest of the tables. I used to work as a bookseller for a venerable old bookstore in Oakland called Holmes Book Company that had been around since the late 1800s. I got a phone call one day from a woman who said, hello, is this Mr. Steinbeck? No, this is Mr. Saroyan. She said, oh, I knew it was one of those California lawyers. Thank you very much for your attention.
I was just talking about this yesterday. That's the thing about kids and kids for just training.
I am Brandon Shotwell. I am Archie Massey's oldest grandson. When I was young, my mom was a single mom, so I spent a lot of time with Archie. Spent a lot of time with my grandmother, Ellen. Not sure if you guys remember going to their houses for all the family functions over there in Palo Alto. I look across the room and I see a lot of familiar faces. I'd like to thank all of you for your part of my life, and I have a lot of fond memories of spending time with Bush, and Bruce, and Johnny, and everyone. So, you know, one of the biggest things was just being around him and getting to experience the culture. And, you know, I remember when I was younger, I was writing music whenever we used to say, oh, they have Archie's house. So I didn't end up doing that as a career. I'm in law enforcement, so I like to think that all my search warrants and arrest warrants and arrest reports are thanks to the bloodline. Yeah. Very nice to meet all of you.
Yeah, outside, that's right. That's
For letting me talk. I'm Archie's daughter, and I looked in Bush's book at the letters, okay, when I was being born. Uncle Willie said, Archie, relax. Although pick daughter is good luck. My father wanted sons, I was a friggin' pick daughter, okay? So I was the biggest disappointment on the planet, okay? And that came Bond, my little brother. The only reason I'm sharing is I moved to LA for most of my life, and my best family friends are Hank and And R and I had correspondence last night, and he said he is sending his love to all of us that are here from his heart. And that's a big thing, because I know the history of, you know, you're a celebrity's child. I do understand. And he was so, from his heart, sending every single person here tonight his love. His wife had surgery, he can't leave LA, and that's the story. And Hank, I also contacted, he said I wouldn't want to miss it at all, but Hank also had health problems, he's a little weak. So again, from Arm and Hank, as of last night and last night, they both say, oh my God, I'm so sorry not to be here. So, all of you, thank you for coming. Thank you, Butch, for bringing, oh my God, we got a cool rockin' family, man. I've never been more proud to be Armenian, ever. I was just in Armenia in October, and I love it.
Just totally out there. I'm going to come right over here to Al Saroyan, who again, this time was supposed to be in Fresno at the dedication of the house. Your daughter came up to me and said, and then we communicated, the next thing I knew they were in the office. And we were at Army Not Grave. We were at his burial plot in San Jose.
Hi, I'm Al Saroyan. My father and William were first cousins. And I'm here today with two of my 5 children, my daughters, Lisa, who lives in Fresno, and Sona, who lives in Walnut Creek area. And I remember as a young boy that whenever the peaches on our ranch in Sanger got really juicy, William was going to be around. And he would come unannounced always, and always welcome and always a joy to be with. I have some very fond memories. And one day I was a young architect getting started in Fresno. And Fresno Bee had done an article with a photograph of me. And that very next day, William came to my office, and he walked in the front door with his bellowing voice and said to the receptionist, "Where is that young man using my name?" And that was some of the fond memories I have of William. He was a character, we loved him, and what a talent. And it's great to see all, and many of you that I have been asked at least 100 times, are you related to this person who lives in San Francisco? And so it's great to see some of you, and I hope to see more of you. And you have to know this young man right here, my first cousin, Ralph Saroyan. And he's a longtime University of Pacific pharmacist and a William Saroyan aficionado. Here he is.
It's good to be here. I don't want to belabor this. It's quite long. With family, that's really bad. I knew William Saroyan because when he came out to pick up the peaches, he also picked grapes and raisins, and my mother would feed him. Last time I actually saw him was in the early 70s, because my brother engagement party at the house, and he told stories all the time. I remember I helped him there on his funeral, and we're pallbearers. I'm sitting next to William and my brother's stand, and he's laughing. We're chuckling during the whole service. And then we get into the car and drive to the cemetery. He apologized to the rest of the hallway. And we were thinking about all the funny stories that we had. It was only how many in the room that are left had slept in his apartment in Paris? Anybody? Anyway, when I was in Europe in 1967, I was one of the lucky family members who was given an instruction that where to eat. I was leaving my brother and my sister at college after 5 months in Europe, heading to Paris, and I had to get off the plane or the train, go to my big suitcase, 5 months of travel, go to the turn to get the key to get to the cross on the table to go up to the 5th floor. And there's only one bed in place, and it's scattered with manuscripts. But I accidentally chased down to it. But the story I want to share is up until about 15, 20 years ago, as we grew up in the Saroyan family, we knew William Saroyan. The mother was a Saroyan, and the father was a Saroyan. We just made the assumption that they were their cousins. And then I was visiting my mother's cousin's wife, and he was a real Saroyan. Most of the water. I discovered this book that Aaron had written, and I want to encourage you to get one. In the first chapter of that book, it tells me, as I'm reading it, that there lived amongst the Saroyan family, there were 4 brothers that lived in Bees, and one was over in this that will selling merchandise and making money back for the 5 brothers. And it said that they lived among the Saroyan family and that and he so admired the Saroyan family that that was my very young. So when I told my niece that he had to change his name, you would have been recording. You would have been recording. And William Saroyan would have been with recording. And so I really encourage you to buy that book. Although whoever reprinted it, it's not following the fire. That's your hard copy. They don't say it again. Thank you very much for pulling this together. I hope you.
That's basically several years ago when Bruce got me started on this project. He introduced me to a publisher over in Oakland by the name of Malcolm Margolis.
Heyday Books.
Yeah, Heyday Books. And Malcolm said, you've got some great plans here. We need to start a Saroyan newsletter.
you need to reach out and tell the world that Saroyan still exists. Because at this point in time, in 2011, nobody remembers him. I have some books of his here that we published, and we haven't sold yet. We'll start a newsletter and include the family in it, because the family will be the basis to start expanding his legacy again. And Malcolm was absolutely right. Unfortunately, my priorities were different at the time. I wanted to get what I was collecting archived and all documented. But that's a great idea. Now that we have everybody's email that we reached out to, we can do a newsletter and that type of thing, and then start planning the next one, where hopefully everybody can attend. Thank you very much, Rob. Okay, guys. I want to know all about your dental practice.
Thank you, Charles. This has been wonderful. I really enjoyed hearing the remarks of many of my family members and those people before. I practiced dentistry in San Francisco for over 45 years, and you might say I knew William Saroyan inside and out. He was my patient. But before that, I first remember him when he came to visit his mother in Takri across the street on Visadero Street. He'd always come across the street and visit with my father and my father's brothers, which you heard about, and my mother would invite him upstairs. And the time I remember the most was shortly after we married Carol Marcus, because my mother invited him again, and they had Armenian coffee, and I remember sitting on a divan in the living room. So that was my first contact with him, and my second contact with him was when I was in college. One of my fraternity brothers, who wanted to be a writer, wanted to meet Bill Saroyan. And he said, well, you know where he lives, Jack, you're his cousin area, why can't you arrange it? At the time, a lot of our writers were doing recordings on these LP records, and Steinbeck did it, and some of the other California writers did it. And of course, Saroyan didn't go to the studio. He wanted to do it at home in his Malibu apartment overlooking the water. In fact, it was actually out over the water. So I called him up on the phone, and I told him that we were going to be down in this area and could we visit. And he wrote back, this is in 1955, he wrote back and said, yeah, when you're in the area, give me a call. And so with two fraternity brothers, I went to visit him in Malibu. And he wasn't in one of these ostentatious homes. He was just in a bungalow out on the wharf, over the water. We called him from a telephone booth, gasoline station telephone booth. And he said, come on over. Well, we went over there, and it was a one-bedroom place, but in every corner there were stacks of magazines and newspapers and stuff he collected off each, a whole box full of shells and stones and things like that. And he really passed the conversational ball around to each one of us. The one that said he wanted to be a writer, he said, think of something else good for life, for a living. And then another one who'd been in the Navy, had gone to Japan, and he just got all the information. And this fellow told all about his travels to Japan, and he never really told anybody else, passing this conversational ball around. And of course, for me, he wanted to know about what my dad was doing, and his brothers, and my sisters, and my mother. He really had an interest in my family. Well, one day at my office, he comes in with no appointment, and in a loud voice, because I think he was losing his hearing, he said to my receptionist, would you tell Dr. Saroyan that his cousin William Saroyan is here? Everybody heard this, you know. Of course, I made time for him to come into my consultation room between patients and have a cup of coffee. And after he asked me about my family members and this and that and the other thing, he said, would you mind taking a look at Sean in here? I said, sure, Bill, of course. So I put him in a chair and examined his mouth, and he asked about this and that and everything. I won't go into details, but he lost a few teeth along the way. And after that, I didn't see him again for another year or so. And the same thing happened again. He just appeared again and wanted to come in. So, of course, I got him in these invitations and talked to him. Well, I had become the editor of the California Dental Association journal. It was an 8-page professional journal. And being the editor, I could give subscriptions, complimentary subscriptions to anybody I wanted to. And I put him on our complimentary subscription list because I knew that everything with the printed word on it, he would read. And I was just waiting for him to say something about this journal. It was all about dental talks and dental articles. So on one of his visits, he was on his way out, and he said something like, oh, by the way, he said, I like reading some of those articles about you dentists. And I said, well, you know, they'd like to read something from you. Oh, he said, oh, what a bunch of dentists want to read something about me for. And I said, no, they really would. He said, I said, they really would like to read something from you. Well, 10 days later, I got a manuscript. It was on a piece of paper that was from a law office. It was about this long on onion-skin paper. It was a couple pages long. I said, God, this is an original manuscript. This is valuable, besides the story that he wrote. And down the bottom he said, and I want this manuscript back. Well, being a professional magazine, we didn't pay people to write stories for us or to write articles for us. But down the bottom it said, it's worth $1,000. He said, but if they don't want to pay me, they can have it for free. Well, the short of it is, we did pay him $1,000 for the article. And I tried to dig it up and find it again to bring it to read to you, but he wrote a 3-page article about, of course, his cousin and the dentist he went through his life and things of that sort. And, another thing that came up was he wanted to pay me for the examination that I did. And I said, I can't take any money for the examination. He said, why is that? I said, Bill, do you know how many people came to me because of my name, your name?
Okay, now we're going to keep coming around the room here. And where is Jackie? Did she have to leave? Okay. Just about there. Got one stop over here. Couple still here.
Anyway, we had come here in 1955.
Speak.
Is that all enough?
No.
Does that count? What was it? Hello? Okay. All right. Well, we came to California in 1955 to the old St. John. We were adopted by Charles' father and mother, and we could not have found a more perfect pair of adopted parents. They were the most wonderful, loving, hospitable, I can go on and on and on. And Charles and his 2 brothers, they were little boys, and I had 2 boys also. And we just became more family, so I just considered it part of my family. And of course got to know Willie through them. Experience in Terry Willie was memorable. We were really charming and Archie, his uncle, said, be sure you check Willie out when we get to Armenia. So So we got and checked and I said, that's really here and it's together. And I just found that it is seriously getting back to me. Anyway, about 3 in the morning, the phone rang. And I was there with my friend. Oh, really? Just kind of roaring into the phone. You could tell him that we had some festivities. And he said, come on over. And I said, well, let me talk to my friend. So we both pulled on the road. We went to his room. And of course, the idolize in there. He must have had 2 tables alcohol with goodies on it. And he said, help yourself. Well, 3 in the morning, but I said, well, we were talking about. Anyway, he talked and he talked and he talked. And it was just really interesting. He was very, very, not just hospitable, like happy to have someone that was really what she said. I'll never forget.
Thank you, Betty.
I love Betty. Thank you.
And now, let's see, we're trying to, just a couple of thank yous to Bobby and Mike for helping and Diane, who basically did everything with Bobby and Mike. And our caterer, Lucina Sarkisian from Hayastan, from Armenia, and her husband, who had hockey cuisine. How was the food? Did everybody enjoy the food? In closing, I want to just give the microphone to my older brother. The one with the mustache. Lucina, come up here. Everybody, this is Lucina. Hockey cuisine. Thank you, Lucina. Everything was delicious.
So all I'd like to say is 2 words about William Saroyan. What a guy, that's all. Now about Saroyan. I went to hear the Mexican ambassador to the United States, whose last name was Saroyan. And having done a little research on the Saroyan name, I knew that the Saroyans came from Persia, and the last name was Saroyan. So before this ambassador spoke, I explained to him what the history of his name was. This guy was very smart. He paid great attention. And when he spoke to the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco, he dedicated his speech to his cousin Bruce, whom he is now very fond of, etc., etc. So the name Saroyan resonates even with his antecedents in Persia being Saroyan. Everybody's been a trooper to be here in this warm room all of this time, and I'm not going to bore anybody with Saroyan stories, but I had the great pleasure of being his lawyer for a time, and if you really wanted to get to know this man, that was a great way to do it. I had the pleasure of hosting him in the White House, the Library of Congress, and in other locations, and I can say that when he showed up, we used to go out in the evening drinking and dining, and he dressed very naturally. But when I took him to the White House, he wore his worst suit with a big stain on one leg. And when he got into the cabinet room, he said, "Oh, I've been here before." I said, "You have?" He said, "I've played poker here with FDR." And so the stories that man had were quite amazing, and what we know of him is just the tip of the iceberg. Anyway, I want to thank my brother Charles for doing this, which is incredible undertaking. He is an inspiration every day to his brothers, especially to me, because of his indefatigable energy, his courage, his taking on projects that nobody in their right mind would take off. So all we can say is keep it up. Thank you, buddy.
With that note, I could call on their heart to say a closing prayer for us all. And by the way, remember this is your church. Support their heart and support this church whenever you have to. Everyone, please rise.
Thank you so much. Just to share a thought as I witnessed the events that unfolded today, it occurred to me that this is a model all Armenian families should endorse and adopt, because it's so important that we tell our stories to each other. And if we don't, our children will never know them, and they're totally lost. So this is profoundly important what you're doing here, for the benefit of your community, for the benefit of your family, but I hope that other families can learn from this example as well. I know that I hope to be sharing stories like this with my daughter one day when she's old enough to understand, and I'm proud that she could be present for auspicious occasions like this. Let's bow our head in prayers and we ask for a blessing from our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. Yevornia, Zavada Borjovo Precise, the Saroyan, Yev, Znamiasia, Danikioke, Tovaya, Sudbabala, Hachi, Havahutia, the Gary, Tishambi, Ajanoria, Rajanoria, Harvard is present, Holy Mr. Holy, Hygiene, Yevnish, Validianas, and the needs. Amen. Be blessed by the Holy Spirit, depart in peace. May the Lord be with you always. Amen.